Football is often called the simplest game in the world because in theory all you need to do is kick the ball into the net. And yet beneath this simplicity hides one of the most confusing, frustrating and emotionally exhausting rulebooks of any sport. A collection of decisions and definitions that not even the players, coaches, commentators or referees fully understand, and which have been the cause of countless arguments in pubs, endless debates on television and riots of anger inside stadiums. These are the rules that shape football not through the beauty of goals, but through the chaos of interpretation. The rules that seem to appear arbitrary, the ones that contain loopholes and grey zones, the ones that fans shout about more than the matches themselves, because they touch the deepest psychological nerve of the game, the need for clarity and fairness. No law in football has created more anger, confusion and emotional collapse than the offside rule. A rule so old it dates back to the 19th century, and yet so controversial that it still sparks fury in the 21st. Imagine the moment. A striker bursts through on goal, the timing of the run perfect in the eyes of the crowd, the ball slotted home, the net rippling, fans screaming with joy, teammates rushing to celebrate. And then, suddenly, the flag is raised, the whistle is blown, and the joy collapses into chaos, half the stadium in disbelief, the other half howling in relief. The core of the offside law is simple in principle. You cannot stand beyond the last defender when the ball is played. But its interpretation has spawned decades of arguments. Active involvement, passive positioning, interfering with play, interfering with an opponent, phases of play, second contacts, the timing of the pass, the shadow of a toe, the lean of a shoulder. And when VAR entered the picture, fans hoped clarity would finally arrive, but instead, the technology amplified the madness, because now goals are erased by frozen frames and geometric lines drawn across the pitch. Goals disallowed for toenails and armpits, moments of pure ecstasy destroyed by a mathematical coldness that strips football of its spontaneity. Psychologists call this a frustration amplifier, because it takes away the most joyful moment in football, the celebration of a goal, and replaces it with doubt, hesitation, and anger. And that is why the offside rule is hated and misunderstood more than anything else in the sport. If offside is the most frustrating, then handball is the most illogical, because nobody in the world seems able to define with certainty what is or isn't a handball anymore. A defender jumps for a header, the ball strikes his arm as he lands, and a penalty is awarded. A striker blasts the ball, it glances off the arm of his teammate before flying into the goal, and the goal is disallowed. Two situations visually almost identical, and yet two completely opposite outcomes. The problem is that the rule has shifted again and again. Is it deliberate? Is the arm in an unnatural position? Is the body made bigger? Is the distance too short? Is the deflection too quick? Each referee interprets differently, each competition adjusts wording, and the result is a mess that drives players and fans insane. Psychologically, humans despise inconsistency because the brain craves patterns and fairness, and when two identical events lead to different punishments, the emotional reaction is rage, despair, and distrust. And this is exactly why the handball law has become toxic to modern football. If the fans cannot understand it, if even referees admit they struggle to apply it consistently, then the sport itself feels rigged by chaos, and that destroys the very foundation of trust that football depends upon. One of the strangest laws now accepted as normal was once revolutionary, because until 1992, goalkeepers were allowed to pick up deliberate back passes with their hands, which turned football into a slow-motion torture of endless rolling passes and time-wasting farces. At the 1990 World Cup, games collapsed into dullness, with keepers holding the ball for ages and defenders passing it back repeatedly to kill rhythm. And FIFA panicked because the world's biggest sport was becoming boring and television audiences were switching off. So the rule was changed. Any deliberate back pass picked up by the goalkeeper would result in an indirect free kick inside the penalty area, and the law transformed the sport instantly because suddenly defenders were pressured, goalkeepers had to learn to play with their feet, and entertainment was forced back into the game. Psychologically, this is fascinating because it was a rule created not to preserve fairness or safety, but to enforce entertainment value. A rare example of football's lawmakers directly punishing dullness to save the product. Today, nobody questions it, but at the time, it felt like a betrayal of tradition, and yet without it, football might have lost an entire generation of fans. Another bizarre rule often forgotten is that the referee is considered part of the field, essentially air, meaning if the ball strikes the referee and continues to bounce, play carries on as if nothing happened. Imagine it, the ball deflects off the referee's body into the path of a striker who scores or bounces kindly for the defending team, and for decades that was perfectly legal because the referee was invisible in the law, a ghost in the game. Only in 2019 did FIFA finally adjust, stating that if the ball hitting the referee creates a direct goal chance or changes possession, play must be stopped. But the bizarre psychology remains. The referee is simultaneously the ultimate authority and an uncontrollable random factor. This paradox explains why referees are both feared and hated, because in the eyes of fans, they represent justice, but in the laws of the game, they can also become chaos, and that contradiction fuels much of the hostility toward officials. If Block 1 exposed the foundations of madness with offsides, handballs, back passes, and referees treated like ghosts, then Block 2 takes us into the territory where football's laws collide with psychology most directly, because now we move into the punishments, the technologies, and the corner cases that make fans scream, not because they do not love the sport, but because they cannot believe how inconsistent or illogical its laws have become. The introduction of yellow and red cards in the 1970 World Cup was supposed to bring clarity, a universal visual language that transcended borders and languages, where every player, no matter if he spoke Spanish, English, or Swahili, could instantly understand the referee's decision. And yet, more than 50 years later, the colors have created as much confusion as they solved, because the difference between a reckless foul, yellow, and a serious foul, red, remains subjective, fragile, and endlessly debatable. One referee sees a sliding tackle as excessive force and brandishes red, ending a player's evening in shame, while another referee, in another stadium, interprets the same challenge as mere mistiming, and the offender walks away with a yellow, free to play on. Psychologically, this is the essence of relative justice, the idea that the same crime can be punished differently depending on the eyes of the judge, and that lack of consistency destroys trust in the system. Fans are not angered by the existence of punishment, but by the randomness of its application, and this paradox makes cards both a necessary tool and a permanent source of rage. When the video assistant referee was introduced, the promise was simple. Technology would eliminate clear and obvious errors, bringing justice and clarity to football decisions. Instead, VAR has created its own labyrinth of frustration. Goals disallowed for armpits offside, penalties given for microscopic shirt pulls, minutes of play frozen while referees stare into screens, the flow of football turned into courtroom drama. The psychology here is devastating. Football's beauty lies in spontaneity, in the eruption of joy, in the chaos of emotion, and VAR interrupts that with silence, with waiting, with uncertainty, and the joy of the moment evaporates before it can be lived. Worse still, VAR did not remove subjectivity. It magnified it, because every replay still requires human interpretation. Only now it is slowed down, zoomed in, and stripped of context, which makes decisions appear even more absurd to the fans who watch them. This is called the illusion of objectivity, the belief that technology guarantees truth, when in fact it only provides more angles for human bias to manifest. At first glance, the rules around restarts, goal kicks, corner kicks, throw-ins seem simple, but in reality, they hide absurdities that often baffle players and fans alike. Until recently, goal kicks required the ball to leave the penalty area before being touched again, which created bizarre scenes of defenders standing still, waiting for a ball to roll a few meters before they could continue play. A ritual that wasted time and made no intuitive sense. The change in 2019, allowing the ball to be played inside the box, made football smoother, yet also created chaos in the interpretation of when play begins, leading to awkward moments of retakes, confusion, and protests. Corner kicks too contain hidden quirks. A ball does not need to leave the corner quadrant fully to be legal, which means tiny nudges or disguised taps can count as official restarts. a loophole often exploited by clever teams to fool inattentive defenders. Psychologically, these small print rules embody the tension between literalism and spirit of the law. The letter says one thing, common sense says another, and when those two collide, chaos reigns. Another absurdity is the goalkeeper's 6-second rule, which states that once a keeper controls the ball with his hands, he must release it within 6 seconds or risk an indirect free kick. And yet, in practice, this law is almost never enforced, with goalkeepers regularly holding the ball for 10, 12, even 15 seconds in key moments, while referees look away. This creates a psychological paradox, a rule that exists but is ignored, a law that shapes behavior by its threat rather than its enforcement, a ghost law that everyone knows but no one believes in. Fans feel injustice, not only when rules are harsh, but when rules are selective, and the 6-second law is a perfect example of selective blindness that undermines trust in referees. Perhaps the most emotionally explosive rule in football is injury time, because it is not fixed, not transparent, and not consistent, but instead left almost entirely to the discretion of the referee. One game receives 3 minutes, another receives 7, and in each case, fans scream that the referee is biased, that the extra time was manipulated to favor one side. The psychology is clear. Humans crave closure. We need to know when the end comes, and when the end is flexible, when it feels arbitrary, suspicion and conspiracy thrive. This is why Fergie time became legend at Manchester United, because the perception, whether true or not, was that referees always found extra minutes for United to score. And perception in football is often more powerful than reality. In the 1990s, FIFA experimented with the most dramatic idea imaginable, the golden goal, a rule that declared the first goal in extra time to be the immediate winner, a sudden death climax that could turn a single strike into eternal glory. Euro 1996, Oliver Bierhoff scores in extra time for Germany against the Czech Republic, and instantly the match is over. Germany are champions. Czech players collapse in disbelief. The psychology of the golden goal was fascinating. It created unbearable tension because every attack could end everything. Every missed chance felt like a life lost, and fans lived in constant anxiety. But it also created fear. Teams often played cautiously, terrified of conceding, and so the intended drama often dissolved into paralysis. After golden goal created too much chaos, UEFA invented the silver goal, a compromise where if one team led after the first half of extra time, the game ended. Euro 2004, Greece beat the Czech Republic with a silver goal in the semi-final, and the rule instantly decided destiny. Psychologists call this temporal framing, the idea that humans adjust behavior when the endpoint is fixed, and in this case, players either desperately defended for 15 minutes or collapsed under the pressure of the clock. The silver goal died quickly, forgotten as an awkward halfway house, but it remains one of football's strangest and least understood rules. For decades, European competitions used the away goals rule. If two teams were tied after home and away legs, the team with more away goals progressed. This produced famous nights where one single strike in a hostile stadium counted double in the minds of fans, creating ecstasy for one side and despair for the other. Psychologically, it rewarded courage, attacking away from home, but it also punished teams unfairly because a goal scored in Munich was mathematically more valuable than a goal scored in Madrid. Fans called it both brilliant and absurd, and eventually UEFA abolished it, but its memory still lingers as one of football's most bizarre twists of logic. Another set of strange rules revolve around penalty shootouts and goalkeepers, who must balance between instinct and legality. For years, keepers had to keep both feet on the line until the kick was taken, a rule almost impossible to enforce in real time, leading to endless retakes and fury. This is the psychology of anticipation versus restriction. Keepers are trained to move early, attackers are trained to deceive, and the law tries to freeze a duel that is built on movement. And then there is the shootout itself. Football reduced to a lottery of nerves, where rules like no stutter step or keeper must not advance create as much confusion as clarity. Football is full of tiny clauses most fans never hear about. If a penalty hits both posts and returns to the kicker, it is a foul. If a player scores directly from a throw-in into his own goal, it is a corner. If lightning strikes the pitch, the referee can abandon the game instantly. Each of these rules sounds absurd, like trivia from a quiz night, but they exist, and sometimes they decide real matches. The psychology is simple. Humans hate exceptions, but football thrives on them because they remind us that chaos is always one step away. When we step back, what unites golden goals, away goals, silver goals, double punishments, ghost keepers, and strange clauses is not just confusion, but the emotional wound of unpredictability. Fans want to believe football is fair, but fairness is subjective, and every strange rule reveals how fragile that belief really is. And yet, paradoxically, these absurdities are what keep us obsessed, because they fuel endless arguments. They keep debates alive in pubs, on television, on social media, long after the match is over, and in that chaos, football finds immortality. Picture the stadium, floodlights bright, scoreline level, 90 minutes gone. Nobody knows how much time is left. Nobody knows if a goal will be worth 1 or 2. Nobody knows if VAR will erase joy in the next minute. That uncertainty drives us insane, and yet it is why we cannot look away, because in football, logic bends, rules break, and chaos becomes drama. The strangest rules may not make sense, but they make stories, and stories are why we care. Now it's your turn. Which of these rules shocked you the most, and which forgotten absurdity deserves to be explained next? Tell us in the comments. We'll pin the sharpest answer. And if you want more hidden psychology of football, like this video and subscribe to Kicksplosion TV, because football is not only about goals, it is about the madness that makes the game unforgettable.